Thomas Morrison was painted in faded white letters on the weathered mailbox of a house that Thomas Morrison had never seen before in his life. The sight stopped him cold as he stood on the gravel road in rural Vermont, his heart pounding with a mixture of confusion and inexplicable recognition that seemed to reach into the deepest parts of his soul. He had been driving through this unfamiliar countryside on his way to a business conference when an overwhelming compulsion had forced him to pull over, as if something ancient and powerful was calling him home to a place he had never been. What began as a simple detour on a Tuesday afternoon in October 2018 would unravel into the most extraordinary case of apparent soul memory ever documented, challenging everything Thomas thought he knew about identity, time, and the mysterious, connections that bind us to places across the boundaries of individual lifetimes. Thomas Morrison was a 42-year-old insurance adjuster from Boston who lived a thoroughly ordinary life filled with spreadsheets, client meetings, and weekend golf games. He had been born and raised in Massachusetts, had attended college in Connecticut, and had never ventured into the rural mountains of Vermont except for occasional skiing trips to the major resorts. His family had no connections to Vermont, no relatives in the area, and no historical ties to the region that could explain his presence on this remote country road. He had been driving to Burlington for a conference when he impulsively decided to take a scenic route through the countryside, drawn by the spectacular fall foliage that painted the mountains in brilliant shades of red and gold. The compulsion to stop had come suddenly and overwhelmingly as he crested a small hill and caught sight of the white farmhouse nestled in a valley below. Something about the scene had struck him with such force that he had immediately pulled over, his hands trembling as he turned off the engine and stared at the property with a sense of recognition that defied all logic. The house was old, probably built in the early 1900s, with peeling white paint, a sagging front porch, and the unmistakable look of a property that had been abandoned for years. But despite its deteriorated condition, Thomas felt an overwhelming sense of familiarity, as if he were looking at a place he had known intimately his entire life. As he walked down the overgrown driveway, memories that couldn't possibly be his own began flooding through his mind. He could see the house as it had once been, with fresh paint gleaming in the sunlight, flower gardens blooming along the front walk, and smoke rising from the chimney on cold winter mornings. These visions were so vivid and detailed that he could smell the wood smoke, hear the sound of children laughing in the yard, and feel the warmth of afternoon sun streaming through windows that were now boarded shut. The mailbox stood at the end of the driveway like a sentinel guarding secrets from another time. The name Thomas Morrison was clearly visible despite decades of weather damage, painted in the same careful script that Thomas somehow knew had been applied by his own hand, though he had never held a paintbrush to that weathered wood. Below his name, barely legible, were the faded words, Emma Morrison, and Thomas felt his heart contract with a grief so profound and immediate that he had to steady himself against the mailbox post to keep from collapsing. Emma. The name resonated through his consciousness like a bell struck in the depths of his soul, bringing with it a flood of emotions and memories that belonged to someone else's life. Thomas found himself walking toward the house as if in a trance, his feet following a path that his mind remembered even though his body had never traveled it before. The front door was locked, but he knew without looking that there would be a spare key hidden under the loose floorboard on the far left side of the porch. His hand moved automatically to the spot and his fingers found the old-fashioned skeleton key exactly where his instincts had told him it would be. The door opened with a groan of hinges that hadn't moved in years, revealing a dusty interior, frozen in time like a museum of memories. The furniture was still in place, covered with sheets that had once been white but were now gray with age and neglect. Thomas moved through the rooms with the confidence of someone returning to a familiar home, knowing instinctively where each doorway led and what he would find beyond each threshold. In the living room, he pulled away a dust-covered sheet to reveal a rocking chair that sent another wave of recognition crashing through his consciousness. He could see himself, or someone who had been himself, sitting in that chair on countless evenings reading newspaper by lamplight while Emma worked on her embroidery in the chair beside the fireplace. The kitchen held the strongest memories of all. Thomas stood at the old wood stove and could smell phantom aromas of bread baking and coffee brewing, could hear the sound of Emma's voice humming softly as she prepared meals for their family. The round oak table where they had shared thousands of conversations still bore the ring stains from coffee cups and the knife marks from decades of meal preparation. On the windowsill above the sink, Thomas found a small collection of smooth, river stones that he somehow knew Emma had gathered during their walks along the creek that ran behind the property. Upstairs, the bedrooms held furniture draped in sheets like ghosts waiting to be awakened. In what had clearly been the master bedroom, Thomas discovered a cedar chest at the foot of the bed. Inside, he found clothing from an earlier era, photograph, albums, and personal documents that would change his understanding of reality forever. The photographs showed a man who looked remarkably like Thomas, though the pictures had been taken decades before his birth. This other, Thomas Morrison, stood with his arm around a beautiful woman with dark hair and gentle eyes who could only be Emma. The photographs documented their life together, their wedding day, family gatherings, quiet moments on the front porch, and scenes of domestic happiness that felt hauntingly familiar to the contemporary Thomas. The documents in the chest told the story of Thomas and Emma Morrison, who had lived in this house from 1923 until 1959. The original Thomas had been a farmer and a part-time carpenter who had built much of the house's interior with his own hands. Emma had been a schoolteacher who had taught at the one-room schoolhouse that once stood at the crossroads 3 miles down the valley. They had been married for 36 years and had raised 3 children in this house, living a simple but fulfilling life centered around family, community, and their deep love for each other. The most poignant discovery came in the form of a handwritten journal that Emma had kept during the final years of Thomas's life. Her entries documented his gradual decline from a heart condition and his growing certainty that death would not end their connection. In her careful script, Emma had recorded Thomas's promise that he would find a way to return to her, that their love was too strong to be defeated by something as temporary as physical death. His final words, according to Emma's tearful entry, had been a vow that he would come back to the house they had built together, no matter how long it took. Thomas Morrison sat on the dusty floorboards of the bedroom and wept for a woman he had never met but whose loss felt like a wound in his heart that had never healed. Emma had lived alone in the house for another 15 years after Thomas's death, maintaining their home and waiting for a reunion that never came in her lifetime. Her own death in 1974 had left the property to distant relatives who had eventually abandoned it when they could no longer afford the upkeep and taxes on the remote rural land. The contemporary Thomas's discovery of the house in 2018 came exactly 60 years after the original Thomas's death, a timing that seemed too precise to be mere coincidence. As Thomas explored more of the property, he found himself moving with the familiarity of someone who had spent decades walking these paths and working this land. Behind the house, he followed an overgrown trail to a small family cemetery where weathered headstones marked the graves of Thomas and Emma Morrison. Standing before their graves, Thomas felt a completion he couldn't explain, as if a circle that had been broken 60 years ago was finally being closed. The emotional impact of his discovery was overwhelming, but Thomas also felt a profound sense of peace and homecoming that had been missing from his entire life. Dr. Rebecca Chen, a psychiatrist specializing in unusual memory phenomena, became involved when Thomas sought professional help to understand his extraordinary experience. Dr. Chen had researched cases of apparent past life memories and was intrigued by the verifiable details and emotional authenticity of Thomas's recollections. She arranged for Thomas to undergo hypnotic regression to explore his memories of life as the original Thomas Morrison, and the results were remarkably consistent with the historical evidence he had discovered at the farmhouse. Under hypnosis, Thomas provided detailed information about farming techniques used in the 1920s and 1930s, described local people and events that were later verified through historical records, and demonstrated knowledge of the property's layout, and features that predated any renovations or changes made after the original Thomas's death. Most convincingly, he accurately described the locations of items hidden around the property, including tools buried in the barn, money cached in a hollow tree, and personal mementos that Emma had secreted away after her husband's death. Local. Historian Martha Whitfield helped verify many of the details that Thomas had provided about life in the valley during the early to mid-20th century. Her research confirmed that Thomas and Emma Morrison had indeed been well-respected members of the community, known for their generosity, hard work, and devoted marriage. Elderly residents of nearby towns remembered the couple fondly and were amazed when Martha showed them photographs of the contemporary Thomas, noting his striking resemblance to the farmer they had known in their youth. The genealogical investigation revealed no family connection between the two Thomas Morrisons, though both had ancestral roots in Scotland and Ireland that might have created distant connections across centuries of migration and settlement. The contemporary Thomas arranged to purchase the abandoned farmhouse and surrounding land, feeling an irresistible compulsion to restore the property to its former condition. As he worked to repair and renovate the house, he found himself knowing instinctively how various systems and structures had been built, where problems were likely to occur, and how original repairs had been completed decades earlier. Local contractors were amazed by his knowledge of old building techniques and his ability to work with tools and materials that were no longer commonly used in modern construction. The restoration project became a labor of love that seemed to heal both Thomas and the house itself. As rooms were cleaned and repaired, Thomas felt memories returning with increasing clarity and detail. He could remember conversations that had taken place in specific rooms, recall the daily routines that had structured life in the house, and even remember the personalities and habits of farm animals that had lived in the barn generations earlier. Most poignantly, he felt Emma's presence throughout the house, as if her love and care for their home had somehow imprinted itself on the very walls and floorboards. Thomas's story attracted attention from researchers studying consciousness, reincarnation, and the nature of memory across lifetimes. Dr. James Patterson, a consciousness researcher at the University of Virginia, documented Thomas's case as one of the most compelling examples of apparent soul memory he had encountered. The combination of verifiable historical details, emotional authenticity, and the mysterious circumstances of Thomas's discovery of the property created a case study that challenged conventional understanding of consciousness and identity. The psychological transformation that Thomas experienced as he reconnected with his apparent past life was profound and positive. The sense of incompleteness and searching that had characterized his entire adult life disappeared, replaced by a deep contentment and purpose that centered around caring for the restored farmhouse. He felt as though he had finally come home after a long journey, and the depression and anxiety that had plagued him for years lifted as he embraced his role as guardian of Thomas and Emma's legacy. Thomas eventually left his insurance career and became a full-time caretaker of the property, opening it as a bed and breakfast for travelers seeking peaceful retreat in the Vermont countryside. Guests often commented on the house's warm and welcoming atmosphere, and many reported unusually vivid dreams and deep, restful sleep during their stays. Thomas himself felt that Emma's loving spirit had never truly left the house, and that his return had somehow allowed both of their souls to find the peace that had eluded them during their decades of separation. The property became a destination for people interested in reincarnation research and past life phenomena, though Thomas was careful to maintain the dignity and privacy that he felt Thomas and Emma deserved. He established a small museum in one room of the house, displaying photographs, documents, and artifacts that told the story of their life together and the mysterious circumstances of his own return. The museum became a place of reflection and wonder for visitors seeking to understand the deeper mysteries of human consciousness and the possibility that love and memory might transcend the boundaries of individual lifetimes. Dr. Chen continued, to study Thomas's case and its implications for understanding consciousness and memory. Her research suggested that strong emotional bonds and deep attachments to places might create psychological imprints that could somehow be accessed by future individuals, whether through reincarnation, morphic resonance, or other mechanisms not yet understood by conventional science. Thomas's story provided compelling evidence that human consciousness might be far more complex and enduring than current scientific models could explain. Years after his discovery of the farmhouse, Thomas remained convinced that he had been guided back to the property by Emma's enduring love and his own soul's need to complete unfinished business from a previous lifetime. The house had been restored to its former beauty. The gardens bloomed with flowers that Emma would have recognized, and the property once again rang with voices and laughter as guests came to experience its peaceful atmosphere. Thomas felt that he and Emma had finally achieved the reunion they had been promised, even though it had taken 60 years and the mystery of apparent reincarnation to bring them back together. The story of Thomas Morrison's homecoming serves as a testament to the enduring power of love and the possibility that some connections transcend the limitations of individual lifetimes. Whether through reincarnation, genetic memory, or supernatural guidance, Thomas's discovery of his apparent former home provides hope that the deepest bonds of human experience continue beyond death, and that home truly is where the heart remembers, regardless of time or circumstance. His case continues to inspire research into consciousness studies and offers comfort to those who have lost loved ones, suggesting that separation may be temporary and that love finds a way to bridge any distance, even across the boundaries of life and death. If this incredible story of love, transcending time, and the mysterious power of soul memory has touched your heart and opened your mind to new possibilities, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue sharing these extraordinary cases that challenge our understanding of consciousness, memory, and the eternal nature of human connection. What do you think guided Thomas to find his former home? Could love really survive across lifetimes to reunite souls? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that notification bell to stay updated on our latest explorations into the mysteries that remind us that some bonds are too strong to be broken by death itself.